Sound po, sir.
Okay. May nakakaproblema ba kayo sa PowerPoint or sa presentation?
Sir,
Pwede na kayo
mahina daw
mag-start.
po yung signal nung nagpe-present, sir. Wait lang po.
Sir, wala pa yung iba po.
Sige din. Magantay tayo. Sige, we can extend naman. Yun nga lang, siguro mangyayari dito, hindi natin to yung 5 groups hindi matatapos ng 1 hour and 30 minutes. So yung iba baka next week na to. Okay? Siguro hanggang group 3 lang tayo. Or kung matagal lang, marami silang masabi, baka hanggang group 2 lang ang matapos. Sige, let's wait for them. Sayang naman, nag-prepare sila. Baka mamaya may pasabog pala or may pakulo sila. Hintayin na lang natin. Okay, sige. I think you can now start group 1. So please listen to group 1 ha kasi gagawa sila rin ng questions dito regarding sa inyong quiz, okay? Pero probably next week pa yun, okay? Sige, group 1, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon, sir. Good afternoon, everyone. Our topic for today's discussion is about drug education. What is the importance of drug education? The drug education is important because young people are faced with many influences to use both licit and illicit drugs. Licit drugs. Licit is yung bawal, drugs na bawal sa batas. Licit drugs. Use and sale of substances which are legal and not forbidden by the law. For example, tobacco and alcohol. Illicit drugs. Bawal sa batas. Illicit drugs refers to highly addictive and illegal substances such as heroin, marijuana, and meth. Erickson.
So, I'm sorry. Before we start, allow me to read to you the learning outcomes or the learning objectives of today's discussion. First, to discuss the basic terms and concepts related to the drug. Second, to describe the general stimulus response and causality of drug use and its legal implication. And lastly, to recommend ways to develop life skills for a healthy and drug-free life. Next slide.
What is drug abuse and drug addiction? Drug abuse is when you use illegal and legal substances in ways you should not. You might take more than the regular dose of pills or use someone else's prescription. You may abuse drugs to feel good, ease stress, or avoid reality. Ang drug abuse ay kapag ginamit mo ang mga legal at illegal na substances sa paraang hindi mo dapat gamitin. Maari kang gumamit na o uminom ng higit sa karaniwang dosis ng mga tabletas o gumamit ng mga reseta ng ibang tao. Maari mong abusuin ang paggamit ng droga para gumaan ang iyong pakiramdam, maibsan ang stress o maiwasan ang katotohanan or to escape reality. Drug addiction. Drug addiction is also called substance use disorder. Is a disease that affects a person's brain and behavior and leads to an inability to control the use of legal or illegal drug or medication. Substances such as alcohol, marijuana, and nicotine also are considered drugs. Ang pagka-addict naman sa droga ay tinatawag na substance disorder. Isang sakit na nakakaapekto sa utak at pag-uugali ng isang tao at pwedeng humantong sa kawalan ng kakayahan kontrolin ang sarili o paggamit ng illegal na gamot hanggang sa ma-addict na siya. Ang mga sangkap tulad ng alcohol, marijuana at nikotina ay itinuturing ding mga droga. Prescription of drug abuse. Prescription of drug abuse is just as dangerous as street drug use. When used appropriately, prescription drugs can have beneficial effects medically or psychologically. Prescription drugs in the opiate family, such as Vicodin, hydrocodone, and OxyContin are often prescribed for chronic pain or recovery from surgery. Benzodiazepines, such as Valium or Xanax, are prescribed to treat anxiety. Ang pag-abuso sa mga niresetang gamot na hindi sayo ay delikado kapag ginamit ng naaangkop ang mga niresetang gamot ay maaring magkaroon ng epekto sa medical o psikolohikal na paraan. Ang mga iniresetang gamot sa pamilya ng oxate tulad ng droga na ginagamit para maibsan ang sakit at nakakatulong sa pagtulog tulad ng Vicodin, hydrocodone, at OxyContin ay kadalasang inirereseta para sa mga malalalang sakit o paggaling mula sa operasyon. Ang mga benzodiazepine tulad ng Valium o Xanax ay inirereseta upang gamutin ang anxiety. Pwede kang magkaroon ng sakit kapag ito ay ginamit mo nang hindi nirereseta sa iyo ng mga doktor. Higit pa rito, ang mga inireresetang gamot ay nagbibigay ng madaling access point sa ibang mga miyembro ng pamilya na madaling maabuso sa droga. Alcohol and smoking. Both alcohol and nicotine can be highly addictive and have serious health effects. Common naman siguro sa atin to ang alcohol at smoking. Ang alak at paninigarilyo ay maaaring maging lubhang nakakahumaling at may malubhang epekto sa kalusugan tulad ng multiple cancers, lung disease, and heart disease, cardiovascular disease. What causes drug abuse and addiction? What makes one person abuse drugs to the point of losing their home, their family, and their job, while others does not? Ano nga ba ang dahilan kung bakit naa-addict o naahantong sa pag-abuso sa droga ang isang tao? There is no one simple reason. Drug abuse and addiction is due to many factors. A powerful force in addiction is the inability to self-soothe or get relief from untreated mental or physical pain. Ang isang malakas na pwersa sa pagka-addict ay kawalan ng kakayahan na paginhawain o pakalmahin ang sarili o makakuha ng kaginhawaan mula sa hindi nagamot na sakit sa isip o pisikal. Kung wala kang self-resilience o suporta upang ma-handle ang iyong stress, kalungkutan at depression, ay pwede kang maakit sa droga upang harapin ang mga sitwasyon. Ang iba pang mga dahilan ay panganib at kinabibilangan ng next. Family history of addiction. While the interplay between the genetics and environment is not entirely clear, if you have a family history of addiction, you are higher risk of abusing drugs. Family history of addiction. It means kapag may family ka na nalulong dati sa masamang bisyo or droga, mas mataas ang peligro na ma-impluwensyahan ka at pwede ka ding maabuso sa droga. History of mental illness. Drug abuse can worsen mental illness or even create new symptoms. History of mental illness o kasaysayan ng sakit sa pag-iisip. Or dati, kung may sakit ka dati sa pag-iisip na naagapan at ikaw ay na-addict sa droga o nalulong ulit, maaring magpapalala ng sakit sa isip o lumikha ng ibang bagong sakit o simptomas sa katawan mo. Untreated physical pain. Without medical supervision, pain medication or illegal drugs like heroin can rapidly become addictive. Hindi nagamot na physical na sakit. Tulad ng anxiety, depression, at stress. Kung walang medical na pangangasiwa, ang gamot sa nanakit o mga illegal na gamot tulad ng heroin ay maaaring mabilis na maging makapagpa-addict sa'yo. Peer pressure. Peer pressure. If people around you are doing drugs, it can be difficult to resist the pressure to try them, especially if you are a teenager. Peer pressure is katulad lang siya ng number 1, family history of addiction. Kung may mga tao sa paligid mo na nalululong sa droga o gumagamit ng droga, maaring mahirap labanan ang pagkaakit o panggigipit na subukan ang mga ito, lalo na kung ikaw ay isang teenager.
Group 1, si John Mark Abata lang ba magsasalita rito? Or lahat kayo may part?
May part po sila, sir.
Okay, sige then.
Trisha.
Before, I'm sorry, dapat una sa una po tong ano. And sasabihin ko lang na lang po tong difference ng ano. To review some, I may say, important concepts. Let us differentiate drugs from medicine. So drugs are any chemical agent that alters the biochemical or physiological process of species of organisms. So it means that when you ingest drugs, okay, it alters the function or the structure of any part of your body. Alters meaning it changes yung mga function or the structure of your body. If it is psychoactive substance, it alters the function or structure of your brain kasi it's psychoactive substance. While medicine, people, is actually a drug. It is actually a drug with curative properties. So you need to remember, people, that medicines are drugs, but not all drugs are medicine. Let me repeat myself. Medicines are drugs, but not all drugs are medicine. So I hope you can fathom that clearly. Next presenter.
Okay, am I audible po?
Yes, you are.
So let's proceed to signs and symptoms of drug abuse and addiction. Next slide, please. So how can I tell if I or a loved one has a drug abuse or addiction problem? Paano nga ba natin malalaman kung ikaw, ako ay involved sa drug abuse or addiction problem? Next slide, please. Although different drugs may have different effects on overall physical and mental health, the basic pattern is the same. Getting and using drug becomes more and more important than anything else, including job, friends, and family. Tama nga naman, di ba? Mas nagiging importante na yung drugs kaysa sa family. Nawawala na yung interest, nawawalan na ng interest yung isang tao sa pamilya sa kakalulong sa droga. Then the physical and emotional consequences of drug abuse and addiction also make it difficult to function, often impairing judgment to a dangerous level. Next slide, please. Darwin, next slide po. So ito na yung physical signs of abuse and addiction. Next slide, Darwin. So number 1 signs of drug and abuse addiction is cycles of increased energy, restlessness is pagkabalisa, and inability to sleep, often seen as stimulants. Stimulants, ito yung class of drugs na nagpapa-increase ng activity sa brain. Katulad ng alertness, mood, and awareness. For example, yung cocaine. Cocaine is one of the strongest and shortest acting stimulants and has a high potential for abuse. When someone uses cocaine, yung energy and euphoria na na-experience is due to a short-term increase in the levels of dopamine circulating in the brain. This boost in alertness can directly interfere with sleep, and chronic use can lead to reduction in rapid eye movement, sleep, leading to daytime fatigue and memory difficulties. Next one is abnormally slow movements, speech or reaction time, confusion, and disorientation often seen in opiates. Yung opiates, ito yung drug that contains opium. Ginagamit ito to reduce pain or to help people to sleep. Next one is yung benzodiazepines. Benzodiazepines naman, ito yung type ng drug na ginagamit to relieve anxiety and insomnia. Sa mga ay ginagamit ito kapag yung mga nagte-take ng drug is hindi nakakatulog ng maayos. Next one is yung barbiturates. Barbiturates, ito naman yung drug na tinetake ng people to make them calm or to help them to sleep. So halos pagkakapareho lang sila ng definition. Then, the third one is sudden weight loss or weight gain. Siyempre, sa pagka-addict mo sa drugs, nakakaligtaan mo ng kumain or nawawalan ka na ng ganang kumain. Baka napapansin niya naman kung nakakita na kayo ng person na nakatake ng drugs is sobrang payat nilang tignan. As in, parang buto na kung titignan natin. The next one is unexpected changes in clothing, such as constantly wearing long-sleeve shirts to hide scaring at injection site. Suspected drug paraphernalia, such as unexplained pipes, roach clips, or syringes. Yung drug paraphernalia, ito refers to any material or equipment or product that is used to manufacture, compound, conceal, produce, process, prepare, or administer a controlled substance. So people who use drugs or unsafe substances may use or adopt everyday household items for these purposes. For example, yung spoon. Example siya ng drug paraphernalia. Kung nakikita nyo, diba yung spoon kapag... Sir, kinakabahan ako. Wait lang po.
Chill lang, Miss Krisa. Hala, huwag kayong kabahan. Nakikinig ako sa discussion ninyo. Okay? Kayo-kayo lang din naman to. Sige, go on. Nakikinig lang naman ako dito. Okay?
Okay, sir. So, yun nga yung drug paraphernalia. Yung mga ginagamit like yung spoon, lighter, and straw, tsaka yung mga burnt oil. Then, for snorted drugs, chronic problems with sinusitis or nosebleeds. For yung term ng snorted drugs, yun yung mga hinuhut-hot. Like, for example, yung cocaine, di ba? Yung pwede nilang gamitin yung papel or straw para hututin yung cocaine kaya nagkakos ng nosebleeds. Then yung for smoke drugs, a persistent cough or bronchitis leading to coughing up excessive mucus or blood. Then progressive severe dental problems, especially with methamphetamine. Next slide po. So let's move on to tolerance and withdrawal. Tolerance, tolerance happens when a person no longer responds to a drug in the way they did at first. So it takes a higher dose of the drug to achieve the same effect as when the person first used it. This is why people with substance use disorders use more and more of a drug to get the high they seek. Tapos yung withdrawal naman, ito yung a group of physical and mental symptoms that can range from mild to life-threatening, such as opioids. Many people who take prescription medicine every day over a long period of time can become dependent, when they go off the drug. They need to do it gradually to avoid withdrawal discomfort, but people who are dependent on a drug or medicine ain't necessarily addicted. So mental and Terwin, i-ano mo. So mental and emotional signs of abuse and addiction. Abuse and addiction also affect the mood as drugs are abused for the temporary feelings they provide. These feelings can vary depending on the drug use. Some mental and emotional signs include cycles of being unusually talkative and cheerful with seemingly boundless energy. So, um, dito is nawa, dito dating,
Kinakabahan po daw si ano.
Kinakabahan ka, Krisa. Okay lang yan.
yes
O,
po, sir, nabablock mind po ako. So
inom
yung
ka
lahat
muna
ng
ng tubig.
sasabihin ko sana po nawawala sa isip ko.
Malapit ka na ba matapos sa part mo?
Yes po, sir. Konti na
Okay.
lang po.
O, inom ng tubig. Inhale, exhale.
Sir, first time ako kasi, sir.
First time.
Sir,
Mas
hindi po
kakaba.
kasi ako maano sa reporting, sir. Kaya masyado po akong...
Oo nga, natetense ka. O,
Yes
ano
po, sir.
lang, do it slowly. Okay? Hindi mo kailangan mag-rush. Wala ka namang hahabulin, di ba?
Go, Krisha.
O, share nyo naman si Krisha. Go, Miss Akad.
Go Akara! Go Akara!
Pag si Ryan na
Go,
talaga yung nagsalita
Bes.
eh.
Kaya mo yan.
Tad! Let's go!
Pag si Ryan na yung nagsalita, iba na yung share niya talaga, no? Pang UAAP
Bakit, sir?
na. Pang
May
UAAP
problema
na.
ba, sir? May nakakatuwa ba, sir? Charot.
Okay na po.
Okay na?
Thank you sa inyo.
Okay lang yan.
Increased
Okay.
irritability, agitation, and anger. Unusual calmness, unresponsiveness, or looking spaced out. Then apathy and depression, paranoia or delusions. Itong paranoia delusions, kunwari, ito yung most common na nangyayari sa mga, kalimutan ko na lang. Ito yung most common na nangyayari. Paranoid delusions, ito yung, di ba, kunwari, ikaw na naka-take ng drugs. Then, nafe-feel mo na lahat ng tao is nakatingin sa'yo, then pinag-uusapan ka, pero hindi naman. Tapos nafe-feel mo na yung government or an organization or an individual is sumusunod sa'yo kahit wala naman. Then, yung temporary psychosis hallucinations. Psychosis, ito yung is a term to describe when you experience reality in a different way to other people. Common examples nito is yung nakakarinig ka ng mga boses or naniniwala ka na yung tao is trying to harm you pero hindi naman, wala ka namang narinig na ganung boses. Then the last one is lowered threshold for violence.
For a moment, Miss Krisha,
Sorry?
I repeat, sa other groups, makinig kayo sa discussion nila ha, kasi sila ang gagawa ng questions sa first quiz ninyo. Okay? No worry, recorded naman tong kanilang discussion para at least pwede nyo pa rin panoorin kapag gusto nyo siyang i-review. Okay? Sige, go on, Miss.
So, teenagers and drug abuse. It can sometimes be hard for parents to tell if their teenager has a drug problem. After all, teenagers are notorious for oversleeping, being argumentative, and pushing boundaries, or wanting their own privacy and space. If you suspect your teen has a drug problem, Look for marked changes in behavior, appearance, and health. Is your teen suddenly having trouble in school? Does he or she seem more and more isolated or have a new group of friends? A teen with drug problems may spend a lot of time sleeping or be keyed up or unable to sleep. Have you noticed that money or objects that could be sold for drugs seem to be disappearing? Do descriptions drugs seem to be used up too quickly? Next na po.
Okay, before I proceed, I want to know if I'm clear enough. Or can you hear me loud and clear as the ocean? Kasi grounded daw po ako kanina.
Okay na, Mr. Erickson. Clear na clear.
Okay, thank you
How about
for
others? Naririnig nyo rin ba yung voice niya? Ang smooth na, di ba? Unlike kanina.
Yes, sir.
Okay, okay na.
you. So there are myriad of effects of drug abuse and addiction to the one abusing the drugs. But not only to the person taking the drugs, hindi lang siya yung self niya yung naapektuhan, it also affects the person surrounds him. It's either his friends, family, colleagues, and the society as well. Next slide po. Okay. Okay. What makes drug addiction problems so challenging to face? As opposed to other mental or physical problems, drug abuse affects the person's life in many ways, including health, finances, and stability. But it also affects the entire family, friends, colleagues, and even the community. What's more, the strong denial and rationalization of the persons using drug make it extremely difficult to get help. It can make concerned family members feel like they are the problem. What are this strong denial and rationalization na sinasabi dito? Matatakal natin lang later on. Next slide muna tayo. Okay. Health, employment, and crime. Those who abuse drugs have a greater risk for health problems down the road, from neglecting their own health risks of infectious disease like hepatitis or HIV from sharing needles. Asan na po? Next slide na po. Yan. Okay. Sabi dito, those who abuse drugs have a greater risk for health problems down the road from neglecting their own health risks or of infectious disease like hepatitis or HIV from sharing needles. How does this happen? Paano nangyayari to? Paano nagkakaroon ng yung parang nahahawakan ng mga sakit na ganyan, mga transmittable disease na ganyan? It's because we have the what we call intravenous drugs. That involves, ito yung mga drugs na involves injecting substances into a vein using a syringe. That's how these transmittable diseases transmit to other people. Like for example, if you are in mga friends mo and nag-drugs kayo using intravenous drugs, syempre nag-share, hindi may iwasan, it's inevitable for you to share needles. Yung mga syringes na ginagamit nyo din sa iba, yun dun yung without knowing or neglecting na meron na palang sakit na ganon yung nyo. So kayo, pag nag-drugs kayo, hindi pag nag-drugs kayo, huwag kayong makipag-share ng needs. But I'm not encouraging you to use drugs, okay? So let's move on to the next slide. There you go. Staying addicted and denial and rationalization. Okay. The denial and rationalization can lead to increased problems with work, finances, and relationship. What is this denial and rationalization? Denial is a type of defense mechanism that involves ignoring the reality of a situation to avoid anxiety. Yung rationalization naman po, it's parang turning tables. You get what I mean? Turning tables, pointing fingers, or even scapegoat. Yung rationalization nyo nandyan, the person abusing drugs may blame an unfair boss for losing her job. So, hindi nyo pwedeng i-blame yung person yung sabi ko kanina, yung rationalization, nagpo-point siya ng fingers, kasalanan naman niya. Did you get what I mean? Or a nagging wife for why he is increasingly going out with friends to get high, while work and relationship stresses happen to everyone. So, another example for this is that a student tayo might blame a poor exam score on the instructor rather than our own lack of preparation. Hindi ko sinasabing basta yung mga drug addict ginagaw ay sinasabing kasalanan ng ng mga kasi napapabayaan nila yung na-neglect na nila yung duties nila as a student. So biniblame nila, nag-turntable sila to the instructor, and it's very, it's very enormous thing. That's very enormous thing. Okay, next slide. There you go. Drug abuse and the family. Sadly, drug abuse and addiction doesn't only affect the person abusing the drugs. Okay, sinabi ko kanina, hindi lang yung sarili niya yung naapektuhan pag na-abuse siya ng drugs. It affects friends, family, and the entire society. Child abuse and neglect is much more common when there is drug abuse in the family. The abuser may neglect a child's basic needs in the quest for more drugs, or lack of impulse control can lead to increased physical and emotional abuse. Drug abuse by a pregnant woman affects the developing baby's health. Domestic violence also happens more frequently. Abusing drugs leads to higher risk of increase and death to self and others in car accidents. So, naman natin, di ba? In the recent headlines, we have watched this, mga nangyaring ganito. Yung mga yung mother, yung pregnant woman, nag-take ng drugs. It affects, syempre, sa yung bata may ipinagbubuntis niya. Yun po. And then, may lead also to death sa mga car accidents kasi yung mga ganun, naka-high sila and without, hindi na nila anong tawag dito? Hindi na nila alam yung mga ginagawa nila. So, nagkakaroon ng mga nagka-car racing yung mga yan, yung mga naka-high, car racing, and doon nakuha yung mga car accidents. And then, another example later on, next slide muna tayo. Okay, family stress. If you have someone you love abusing drugs, it's enormous emotional strain. You might feel obligated to cover for the abuser, cutting back from work to deal with the abuser's problems, or working more to make financial ends meet. Ito yung mga family mo na mismo yung nai-stress, yung mga instances, may mga ako din, nabalitaan ako sa Tuaw, Cagayan. yung anak niya is parang nasangkot siya or na siya sa isang pandemonium, hindi siya pandemonium, parang it's a brawl. It's a brawl between parang may labanan, basta yung parties nila. And then parang may napatay ata, napatay talaga, as in napatay. And then yung mother, imbes na yung anak niya, kasi siya talaga yung alam niya kasi inamin daw nung bata sa mother niya na ginawa niya yung crime. And then, ginawa ng mama niya, siyempre, kino-cover up niya yung ng bata. Imbes na i-rehabilitate or yung anak ko, ako mismo i-rehabilitate ko talaga yan. Charot. Basta yung niya, dapat hindi niya kino-cover up. Yun yung stress na din nila. Siyempre, anak nila yun. Pero ako, hindi ko hahayaan na ganon. Charot. Okay. Cutting back from work to deal with the abuser's problems, or working more to make financial ends meet. You might not be able to see friends and engage hobbies as coping with the abuse takes more time. So, nagfo-focus ka na sa kanya, yung mga nakakalimutan mo na yung mga dapat mong yung mga gagawin mo, napupunta na lahat yung time mo dun sa tao. Okay? And then, also, the shame of drug abuse in the family stops many family members from asking for help instead of pretending nothing is wrong. The emotional toll can be overwhelming. Children are especially sensitive. Okay. Next. Okay, let's move on to the classification of drugs. Under Republic Act 6425, takedown, under Republic Act 6425 or the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1972. Section 1, short title. This act shall be known and cited as the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1972. Article 1, Section 2, the definition of terms, which includes the prohibited drugs, and the regulated drugs, The prohibited drug and the regulated drugs. So what is this prohibited drugs, people? Huh? Prohibited drugs, from the word itself, prohibited. These are the drugs that are what do you call this? Banned. These are the drugs that are forbidden to use. We and thus includes the opium and its active leaf and its derivatives. Derivatives is a compound that is derived from a similar compound by a chemical reaction. So that's it. That is derivatives such as heroin and morphine, coca leaf and its derivatives, principally cocaine, alpha and beta cocaine, hallucinogenic drugs such as mescaline, lysergic acid, diethylamide, or the LSD, and other substances producing similar effects, the Indian hemp and its derivatives. All preparations made from any of the foregoing and other drugs and chemical preparations, whether natural or synthetic, will, with the physiological effects of a narcotic or hallucinogenic drug, amended by the BP or the Batas Pambansa 179 on March 2, 1982. What are those, may mga alam kayong prohibited drugs? Example ng mga prohibited drugs. Anyone? Kung may alam kayo, speak up. Charot. Okay. So,
Green apple.
example, yes, Mr. Orata.
Or you participate. May tanong si Mr.
Green
Balyag.
apple.
Apo?
Green apple, drugs sa club.
Naku, hindi ko po alam yan. Charot lang. Yun yung example niya, yung pinagbabawal talaga is the methamphetamine hydrochloride, or also known locally as the shabu and the marijuana. Yun po yung main na dalawang drugs na ban sa Pilipinas. Okay? Next is we have the regulated drug. Next slide. Okay. Regulated drugs are the one that is researched. These are the drugs that researched, manufactured, distributed, and administered under the supervision of regulating authorities. Ito yung mga later which includes self-inducing sedatives. What are those sedatives? These sedatives is a type of prescription medication that slows down your brain activity. Pampakalma to. Example pa ng pampakalma, we have the epinephrine, more commonly known as the adrenaline. For strong emotions, yung mga ginagamit nilang sedatives nila. And then, yung nag-intern kasi ako sa RH Calayan. And then, yung pharmacist doon, gumagamit, ano yung tinitake mong drugs? Na-curious ako, ano yung hindi siya familiar? Yung name ng gamot, nakita ko hindi siya familiar. And then, I asked her, ano yung tinitake mo? It's for antidepressant daw. And it's amoxapine and amitriptyline. Ata yung sabi niya, amitriptyline or the Elavil. Yun yung mga regulated drugs, yung mga pampakalma, which includes okay? Such as secobarbital, yung mga secobarbital, phenobarbital, pentobarbital, barbital. Ano ba tong barbital? It is a chemical compound also used in the veterinary practice for central nervous system depression. So naka-focus talaga siya sa ng depression, to cure depression. Pero sa mga animal pala, meron din silang ginagamit, which is what we call the barbital there. Okay? Okay. Such as benzedrine or dexedrine. Okay, wait lang kuya. I'm not done yet. Yan. Benzedrine or dexedrine or any drug which produces a physiological action similar to amphetamine, and hypnotic drugs such as metacolon, nidrazepam, or any other compound producing similar physiological effects. Amended by PD number or the Presidential Decree number 1683 on March 14, 1980. So that's it. Before you proceed, kung may mga tanong pa kayo, ibato nyo na, Char. Isa mga yung mga sinabi ko, may mga violent reactions ni Jan, may mga nag-disagree sa mga sinabi ko. Ngayon
May questions kayo, tanong nyo na sa kanila. Para
Yes.
later on, hindi na kayo magtatanong sa kanila sa chat na ano yung sinabi mo nandito, mga ganyang bagay. Okay, it's your moment to ask questions.
Okay, go ahead.
Yung Republic Act po.
Okay. Hindi ko kasi na-include sa ano. I'm so sorry. So, Republic Act 6425 po. 6425 or the Dangerous Drugs Act of 1972. Did you get it?
Opo.
Anyways, ipapa-add ko na lang dun sa PPT namin
Dangerous.
later on after this.
Thank
Okay?
you.
All right. So,
Ano
if
yun?
you
The Dangerous Act of.
let's move on to the next presenter.
Audible po ba ako?
Yes.
Okay, let's go naman po sa common use and abuse drugs. So what are the examples of mga prohibited drugs na sinasabi kanina ni Kuya Erickson is isa is yung marijuana. Yan yung mga picture niya or mga example kung ano yung itsura ng marijuana. Next slide please. So ano nga ba ang marijuana? Marijuana, often called grass, pot, or weed, is a crude drug made from cannabis sativa, a plant that contains a mid-alternating psychoactive ingredients called tetrahydrocannabinol. So, ang tetrahydrocannabinol po is ito yung nagbibigay sa'yo ng sensation of being high. So, marijuana slows down the user's mental and psychomotor activities. Users don't remember what they have learned when they are high. The effects of marijuana can also impair thinking, reading comprehension, and verbal and mathematical skills. So, yung epekto nito is nakakapagwala ng pag-iisip, kumbaga nawawala ka na kapag nakatake ka na ng marijuana. Marijuana creates other health problems related to, example is the reproductive health system, the heart, the lungs. It has been found that marijuana use may lead to cancer. Long-term regular use of marijuana may lead to psychological dependence. Once started, it may take more of the drug for the users to get the same effect. Young marijuana users are more likely to go on experimenting with other drugs. So according sa mga napapanood kong news, sa ibang bansa daw is legal daw ang marijuana like sa bansa ng Canada, Mexico, Georgia, South Africa, etc. So, ang ginagamit nila ang marijuana para po sa meditation like Alzheimer's disease, appetite loss, or epilepsy, and more. Next slide. Other than that, punta naman po tayo sa immediate effects or the short-term effects of marijuana. One is the faster heartbeat and pulse rate. Ito daw, ang marijuana daw, kapag nakatake ka ng marijuana is napapabilis daw yung pulse rate mo. Kumbaga, kung ang normal heartbeat natin is 70 to 80 beats, kapag naka-under marijuana ka naman, dumodoble yung epekto nito. And next is the bloodshot eyes. Ito naman is yung kapag nag-take ka ng marijuana talaga is pumupula yung mata mo. Ito naman yung epekto niya sa mata mo, yung nagre-red siya. And yung pangatlo, dry mouth and throat. Ito naman yung namamaga yung throat mo dahil sa epekto nito sa brain natin na also binds to the receptor sites in the brain, and this also reduce the production of saliva. Nakakapanghina ng production ng saliva natin, kaya nagdra-dry mouth and basta yun. And for yung pang-apat is yung altered sense of time or disorientation. Ito naman yung nawawala ka na sa sarili mo, anxiety and paranoia, unpleasant thoughts, yung imagination mo nagiging wild na, tapos pwede kang makakos ng danger sa ibang tao kapag naka-under marijuana ka. And sa panglima, forgetfulness, inability to think. Ito yung hindi mo talaga alam kung ano yung iniisip mo, gaya ng sabi ko kanina, nakakawala ng pag-iisip. Pang-anim is impaired reflexes, coordination, and concentration. Acute panics, anxiety reaction, extremes, fear of losing control. Ito yung wala ka ng control sa sarili mo, di mo na alam yung ginagawa mo. At marami pang iba, yun na. Next slide.
Long-term effects. First is chest pain. Alam naman nating lahat na ang chest pain ay isa sa sign of something serious that requires the medical attention. Ang mga symptoms nito ay shortness of breath, palpitations, dizziness, or sweating. Next is irregular menstrual cycle. Base sa aking research, 2016 report also suggests marijuana disrupts the menstrual cycle and can lead to anovulatory cycles or cycles without ovulation. Marijuana can affect the production of luteinizing hormone in women. Luteinizing hormone regulates testosterone production in men and stimulates female ovulation. Pag ang lalaki gumagamit ng marijuana, they tend to have lower levels of testosterone. And sa babae, they have less luteinizing hormone. That's why irregular menstrual cycle ang babae kapag gumagamit ng marijuana. By the way, para sa kaalaman po ng lahat, luteinizing hormone helps control the menstrual cycle pag sa babae, while sa lalaki, ang luteinizing hormone causes the testicles to make testosterone, which is, it is the important for producing sperm po pag sa lalaki. Next is temporary loss of fertility for both sexes. First, sa female fertility, na ang mga babaeng gumagamit ng marijuana ay increase in risk of pregnancy loss. While sa lalaki, it may be negatively impact across several domains, like testicular atrophy, sexual dysfunction, and lower levels of various hormones required for production, including the testosterone. Next is premature babies or low birth weights. Ang mga babaeng gumagamit ng marijuana during pregnancy, they are putting their babies at risk. Most likely to have health problems, including premature birth and death, kumpara sa hindi gumagamit ng marijuana. It is according to, base sa aking research, it is according to an analysis of nearly 5 million California women who gave birth between 2001 and 2012. Last is cancer. Mostly, nagkakaroon ang mga gumagamit ng marijuana ang lung cancer. That's it. Next.
Next is shabu. Shabu is a white odorless. Shabu is a white odorless crystal or crystalline powder with a bitter numbing taste. In the street name for a chemical substance known as metaphetamine, it is also popularly known as poor man's cocaine. Other slangs names are shabs, ubas, siopaw, sha, and ice. Kama na sa atin tong word na tong shabu, kung nanonood man kayo ng news about sa bypass operation, ganun. And next is, these are the side effects of methamphetamine to our body. First, it can produce anxiety, irritability, irrational behavior, talkativeness, and loss of control o pagkawala sa sarili. Second, it result in lost appetite and inability to sleep. Third, it can lead to acute psychotic reaction, violent, and destructive psychotic reaction. Psychotic reaction is a symptom of serious mental disorder. So, maaring maka-experience tayo ng hallucination or delusions, and it can result some violence. Pang-apat is behavior and recklessness that may result in accidents. Siyempre, your behavior will change because dahil dun sa effect ng methamphetamine, and it can result some accidents and massacre. Kagaya ng napapanood natin sa balita. Ganun. Next slide. Psychological effects include chest pain,
o pananakit ng dibdib, irregularity of her heartbeat o hindi normal ng pagtibok ng puso, hypertension, convulsion, and death from cardiac arrest. The psychological and physical depends. This chemical substance is known to produce psychological and physical dependency. These are characterized by anxiety, tension, and craving for the substance. This substance-seeking behavior can lead to various criminal and other antisocial acts. So, physical dependence is maaring maipakita sa pamamagitan ng pagkakaroon ng sintomas na withdrawal kapag ang gamot ay hindi ininom. Withdrawal symptoms occur when drug is aborting stop. Among these feeling apathy, hyperinsomnia, excessive period of sleep, and depression. Depression may lead to suicide. Ang withdrawal symptoms naman ay ang biglang paghinto ng gamot na may kakayahang magdulot ng physical na pag-asa. Next.
So, in long-term effects of shabu, psychiatric consequences are the major features of chronic shabu abuse and dependency. So, gaya nga nung sabi ni Darwin kanina, metaphetamine is known to produce psychological and physical dependency. So, it is known that this drugs is very addictive, and because it causes a pleasurable effects to a person. So, pag once na-consume mo na to, it's gonna be very hard to stop, which is kapag, kunyari, pag sinubukan mong mag-take ng methamphetamine, it will be very hard to stop na kasi pag once na sinubukan mong tigilan yon, magkakaroon ng parang hindi ka mapakali, or parang hinahanap-hanap mo na palagi yung drugs, which is nakaka-apekto yan ng masama sa mental health problems, sa mental health mo. Prolonged use and even a single exposure, especially if administered intravenously, can lead to manifestations of a full-blown psychosis, which is similar to schizophrenia, characterized by the presence of paranoid delusions, auditory, and visual hallucinations. So, schizophrenia it's a mental disorder, which is, sabi nga dito, nagkakaroon na ng delusions, hallucinations yung tao, and paranoid na siya kung ano-ano nang nakikita niya, which is yung gagaya nung mention ni Miss Akad kanina, kung the person is having a hard time to differentiate reality and delusions. Some chronic users have difficulty concentrating or remembering things, diminished ability to cope with problems, and difficulties in facing reality are common. Loss of interest in sex, ambition, or motivation may also result. So, gaya nga ng sabi ko kanina, nahihirapan na sila ma-differentiate kung ano nga ba kung ano yung totoo or kung ano yung hindi, kung ano-ano na yung nakikita nila, which sometimes can cause a person to act violently then. And methamphetamine can be consumed in different ways. Pwede mo siyang it can be snorted, smoke, injected, and orally ingested. Chronic snorters may suffer from severe irritation of the nasal passages, and at times may even difficult tissue perforation of the nasal bleed. So, yung chronic snorters, may possibility na magkaroon ng irritation dun sa nasal passages nila, and because of that, nagkakaroon ng nasal bleed. And renal damage, heart disease, and strokes have been documented among chronic abusers. So, yung kidney failure, heart disease, and strokes, yun yung mga possible mental health problems na makukuha natin sa pag-consume ng methamphetamine or shabu. Injecting shabu from contaminated needles may lead to risk of infection, resulting in inflammation of the blood vessels, which is phlebitis, and endocarditis, which is the infection of the heart valves, and septicemia, which is the blood poisoning. And the most dreaded disease, AIDS. So, gaya kanina yung mention ni Erickson, yung pag-share ng needles, which is nagkakakos siya ng HIV sa tao kasi most of the time, contaminated yung needles. So, very, very crucial siya to get HIV or AIDS. And all of these risks can cause a death of a person. So, overall, it's a fair warning to say na the more you consume these drugs, the longer you got addicted to it, the more you put your life at risk.
Inhalants. Inhalants are a broad range of household and industrial chemical whole volatile vapors or pressurized gas can be concentrated and breathed in via nose or mouth to produce intoxication in a manner not intended by the manufacturer. It is also a solvent or other materials producing vapor that is inhaled by drug abusers. So, ito yung drugs na nilalanghap and nabibili ito sa kung saan-saan or sa mga tagong lugar. So, if you take this drug, nagbibigay ito ng panandali ang kaginhawaan sa ating katawan. Pero, mas lamang pa rin yung side effect nito. So, there are immediate and long-term effects of inhalants. Next. So, the immediate effects are confusion or disorientation, yung pagkakalito or pagkataranta, distorted perception of time and distance, aggressive behavior, pagkaka-agresibo, hallucination, illusion or nausea and vomiting, yung pagkahilo at pagsusuka. Next.
So aside from the immediate effects of or short-term effects of inhalants, we also have these long-term effects of inhalants. So first, we have the loss of memory. Second, inability to think, followed by muscle cramp and weakness, numbness in limbs, abdominal pains, damage to the central nervous system, kidney, and liver. And lastly, we have the bone marrow depression. So let's go first sa loss of memory. Paano nga ba at kailan nagkakaroon ang pag-loss ng memory ang isang taong gumagamit ng inhalants? So, first, let's have a simple recall about the definition of inhalants. Basically, we already know that inhalants is a type of drug that contains chemical vapor such as rugby, thinner, paint, permanent markers, and other industrial chemical substances whose volatile vapor which to induce mind-altering as well as to the body. So, inhalants can cause loss of memory, especially to those who use inhalants for a long time. Well, the main reason why loss of memory happens among users, it is because inhalants have the ability to damage and kill brain cells gradually into our brain. So, second, we have the inability to think. Just like what I said on the loss of memory, that inhalants causes damage and kill brain cells gradually into our brain. So, unti-unting nagkakaroon ng damage ang ating mga utak kasi our brain is very sensitive to chemical gases and other substances of chemical vapors. And pangatlo, muscle cramp and weakness. Kasama na rin dito yung numbness in limbs o pamamanhid sa paa o kaya sa mga kamay natin. And also, the abdominal pains. Etong tatlong to ay isa sa mga side effects kung bakit nangihina ang katawan ng user at nagkakaroon ng mga symptoms like numbness in limbs tsaka abdominal pains. Because with inhalants, it may result brain damage which can lead to compromise in the muscular system part of the human body. These substances may produce severe psychosis which can increase the risk that a person will act impulsively or exercise poor judgment and injure themselves. So, if we say psychosis, for example, nakaka-experience ang isang user na parang may mga voices na kanyang naririnig sa kanyang paligid, and parang iniisip niya na may mga tao sa paligid niya na parang gustong saktan siya kahit wala naman talaga. And 6, damage to the central nervous system, kidney, and liver. Well, this effect is commonly known as one of the most crucial stage of having this type of disease caused by the substances of chemical vapors. Paano nga ba naapektuhan ang mga ito sa paggamit ng inhalants? If we talk about the central nervous system kasi, it is referring to our brain and spinal cord. Very common and sensitive kasi ang mga parts na ito sa ating katawan kapag nakasakap ang ating body ng mga iba't ibang uri ng chemical solutions. And lastly, we have the bone marrow depression. The bone marrow depression is a very crucial and serious at its stage among the components of drug addiction effects like inhalants that is literally affect our immune system. So what is bone marrow depression, by the way? Meron kasi tayong tinatawag na myelosuppression, which is also commonly known as the bone marrow depression. If we say myelosuppression, it is a condition in which bone marrow activity is decreased, resulting in fewer red blood cells, white blood cells, like the hematopoietic cells. If we say hematopoietic cells, it is referring to the cells that usually give rise to other blood cells and which responsible for the production of mature blood cell in the bone marrow. And what causes bone marrow depression? Basically, if the completion of mature blood cells is not properly being processed in the bone marrow, and also kapag nalulong na ang isang tao sa drugs like inhalants, and then dito na nagkakaroon ng abnormality sa ating mga bones, at saka hindi na gaano nagpo-produce ng blood cells ang ating bone marrow. Kaya rin dito na nagkakaroon ng mga malfunctions ang ating mga buto-buto once na ang isang tao ay nalulong na sa ganitong bisyo.